I don't know exactly. I was like listening to like the older Barclay Crenshaw stuff and then the newer stuff and trying to figure out the sort of the best way to start talking about any of this kind of stuff. But I feel like maybe the best way is just asking you kind of where your head is at and how you're feeling with everything, because I'm sure this is a transition you've been planning for a long time, but I feel like the moment of actually getting to the transition probably feels different than the planning of it.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, this is an interesting question because there was definitely a point where I just said to myself, what are you doing? And are you psyched about it? And what haven't you done that would really be exciting? And it just kept coming back to this music that I started out with when I was a little kid. I really listened to a lot of hip hop and funk and electro, and like we just had this radio station in Detroit where the best DJ was called the Electrifying Mojo, and he just played all of this stuff that, looking back, I just cannot even believe that that show existed, because it was so unlike what everyone else was listening to.
Yeah.
And I then got into jungle, like in college or after college, and I always was into like breaks and all this stuff. And then somehow I just got good at house music. And because I got good at it, I think humans tend to just take the path of least resistance. And I'm not going to say there was no resistance. It was definitely hard, but I had really good success with house. And I had I'm giving you the longest possible answer.
No, this is great. It is a podcast. This is perfect.
I had an almost like immediate success with house, where I had made multiple jungle EPs and multiple like weirdo awe-techer type things. And I'd even made like Chemical Brothers kind of like big beat, and failed multiple times doing all of that. And for some reason, the house, partially because I've been just doing music for so long, that I just kind of like figured it out, what was going to work and like what was cool to me. And that just luckily resonated all at the same time with everyone. And that became 20 years of my life.
Right. I mean,
I was like,
not to cut you off, but I mean, I feel like there's something in that too, of if you're focusing on this one thing, the roots of it, the break beats, and that's in your head, that's the serious thing. And then house music is sort of like blow off steam, have fun, and you don't have to, take it as seriously in your mind. I feel like in some ways that's sort of a hack for creativity as well.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up, because at the time when I wanted to be in the jungly scene, it was the most restrictive time possible. It was like the time where if you weren't from London, maybe even a certain part of London, there was no way.
Yeah.
And I even talked to this guy, TB.
Oh, I love TB. Yeah.
Who did subtitles and all that. And he's like either Swedish, or he's going to be mad if he hears this, Swedish or Norwegian. He's from Scandinavia. And I talked to him on the airplane, like going to Ibiza or something. And I'm like, oh my God, fucking TV, holy shit. And he had an English accent.
Ah.
And I was like, what? But aren't you from Scandinavia? And he goes, yeah. I had to pretend I had an English accent for like 10 years just to get anyone to listen to my records.
Dude, I mean, I'm saying there's like people talk about gatekeeping in music now. And for me, I'm like, oh, you guys don't know, man. Like there was no gatekeeping like drum and bass gatekeeping in the late 90s. And I always make this joke too, and I'm sure you know this. It's very funny to me that at a certain era in American drum and bass, every city had one American MC who only used a British voice when he was performing.
Yeah.
That was always the funniest thing to me, is like you'd just be talking to like a guy from Boston with a Boston accent, and then he'd get up on stage and be like, dibby dibby dee.
Was Armani from here?
Armani's Philly. He's Philly.
Yeah. He managed to get on some records.
Oh, for sure. And there's a few who don't. And I'm not even shitting on the guys who did use the UK accent. Like, I get why they needed to, but it's just a funny thing.
Man, what a time.
What a time. I just talked to Armani. He was on this show like a month ago, man. Cool. He's still doing it, man. He's still, he's got a new project with Bro Safari, and he's doing a bunch of hip hop, like battling stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One thing that you might find interesting is that I was on the swim team with Nigel Richards, who started 611 Records in Philly.
No way.
And when he was doing it, I was in college and I was younger than him. And he would come back from the summer, and he would be like, dude, I'm throwing these warehouse parties and listen to this stuff. And I'd be like, what is that? And I didn't get it. I didn't understand what he was doing at all.
Wow.
Not even a little bit. And I just kind of was like, whatever. And then many years later, I was like, oh my God, Nigel was doing like my future job before me. And I just didn't pick up on it.
Just didn't catch you at the right time. Was that the period of time when you were really into breaks and electro and drum and bass and all that? Yeah.
So he was into this like Philly, like techno whistle parties sound, and I was just
whistle
like,
party,
whatever.
Dude. I love that you said whistle parties because I know exactly what you mean.
I just didn't get it.
So I mean, this is working our way back around, I guess, to the original question. Is like, when did the connection happen? Was house kind of just, it ended up working out? You were, technically proficient enough to like make it well. Maybe it was a refreshing thing. You could bring some new ideas in. And now you've kind of come full circle back to the stuff you loved in the first place. Does it feel like another iteration of that cycle where now that stuff, you are detached enough from it to come back with sort of a fresh perspective?
Yeah. But also, the first time around, it had a lot to do with my friend group, because you don't have like, you're not like walking around like I'm the best ever. When you're starting out, you're just like, oh my God, am I going to get an opportunity ever?
Yeah.
And so the fact that my friend group was all trying to make this kind of house, and we're all former drum and bass DJs who couldn't get into drum and bass, is very interesting. They were like, we all like drum and bass. And then it was like, we don't have any jobs for you. And then we're like, well, we like house. And they're like, okay.
All right. They're like, yeah, we got a couple positions open. Yeah.
maybe you can worm your way into that. Even then we weren't like, but yeah, to answer your question, I'm feeling like this time, for doing it for so long, I have a little bit more, I guess it's confidence that I'm just going out on a limb. There is no like group of people that I'm trying to outdo with this track or that track. It's just me, like at my house with my family. And I'm like, you know what? I just want to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's back to sort of the pure love of it, right? Because certainly this isn't a move that like, I don't know. I doubt there was like a management team in your ear begging you to do this. You know what I mean?
This is a financially stupid idea.
But I will say, okay, I was, this is a very different situation, but earlier today I was talking to Flux Pavilion and we were kind of talking about this idea of how, God, this is a weird connection debate, but we were talking about how Shaq is doing DJ, like dubstep DJing now. And I was sort of talking about this idea where I was like, well, Shaq is rich. Like that dude has a lot of money. He did not need to do this, which is why it's kind of fun to watch him do it, because I know he's doing it purely because he loves it, you know?
Yeah, he loves it. I watched an interview with him and he's like, I miss the crowd and I'm able to get the crowd experience without having to be good at basketball anymore.
Yeah.
By DJing.
But for you, I guess that's my point too, is like, it feel like it's fun to watch you have fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because if you watch this from a commerce side, what's the hottest genre on planet Earth right now? Tech house. What is the genre that I did? Tech house. What financially, what planet am I on where I would just be like, you know what? I don't need any of those checks. I'm good. I'm just going to go do fringe bass music.
Well, this connects to something else I wanted to ask you about, because in sort of reading the press release about the Barclay Crenshaw project and the tour, that I think by the time people hear this, all of this will be announced and all that. Yeah. But a lot of the way it was phrased was sort of like, in a return to the underground mentality. And I feel like you do have a tendency to always sort of tack towards the underground in a way. And I was curious, like, was that part of what was happening to House? Like, was that in some ways a weird turn off, that it was like getting a bit too mainstream, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I've been around long enough to see a lot of the cycles, and I don't want to get into like saying anyone's name or anything, but the house scene right now for me is very similar to the trance scene when that was like white hot. Paul Van Dyke, Barry Corsten,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Armin van Buuren. These guys were like number one DJ in the world every year for like 10 years. And it was everybody was just loving
the arpeggios, yeah.
And it was so massive. And I think that genres get this shine here and there. It happens. So like the first time that Skrillex came out and kind of like reworked what they had been doing in the UK into this like digestible American TV dinner kind of thing. Like he really flipped that and that was like the hot shit. And every genre has these like moments. So we're in a moment for that genre. And my natural inclination is Green Velvet always says I'm a hater, and I try not to be a hater, but it's like the things that have to happen for a genre to get that big require it to get cleaned up so much.
Yep.
That there are no quirks or like mistakes or like gritty human feeling things in it. It's like a calculation. Every second of that track is like a calculated thing to like get people to jump up and down. I don't know what am I going off the deep end?
No. I'm right there. No, I'm right there with you. I mean, I think it's the more mainstream something gets, the less room there is for innovation, you know? Like it's all kind of everything converges into a single point because it's kind of, I mean, not to extend this too far, but it's like it's what we do with everything in America. It's like it just has to keep growing and keep getting bigger and expanding. You know?
Right. They have to sell more iPhones and they have to
Right.
sell more tech house tracks right now.
Yeah, exactly.
The producers are amazing. Like, I'm actually impressed. Like, they've taken the science of maybe what we were doing in 2010 and like, what's the thing called when the chef like cooks down the sauce and then he cooks down the sauce again?
Yeah, reduces it. Yeah.
They're reducing the sauce into like only the actual flavor element is. So they're so good at making it that they already know what's the result. Like the tracks are like just so well made that it's incredible, but it's also a little bit less interesting.
Right. Well, I mean, for you, like what that sort of underground mentality, like grassroots community kind of idea, I think Dirtybird has been so successful in cultivating an interesting, unique group of people that really does feel like an actual community, which I think is more and more rare in the modern era of dance music. What is that for you? Where does that come from? Like, are there early communities for you or early underground scenes that you really felt a part of that gave you an identity early on?
Yeah, I mean, even when I was in like elementary school, I wanted to have a club or be in like a group. And then in Detroit, when I was a little older, I was never 100% cool enough to be in the crew of cool people. And I realized like way later that that's all just kind of bullshit. But when you're on the outside, like looking into this like cool guy Detroit warehouse party scene, you just want to be a part of it. And you just want that people to be like, yeah, like, it's hilarious. Like, I'll still call people that I went to the Detroit warehouse parties with when I'm playing now.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back in my head sometimes when I'm contacting, I'm like, why are you calling this person? You're literally still trying to get them to think you're cool. Like 20 years later, you're still trying to get them to think you're cool. Like, they're like, retired. They're
Dude,
not going to race anymore.
It never
They don't
ends.
care if you're cool.
God, that's funny. But it's so true. I mean, there's certain parts of it's got to feel nice in a way to bring it back to the like Barclay Crenshaw project, to get back to that sort of in that spirit too of like, you know, let's get back to that kid who wanted to be the cool kid, and maybe now he has an opportunity to live that dream a little more, you know?
I mean, isn't that every single story of every person that it's like everybody who wasn't cool wants to be cool when they're older?
Of course. But and just the fact that we can never fully feel that, you know, it's like, we're always going to be that kid in some way.
It's true. There's always the little kid vibe of like, even, you know what? Every person who makes music has this thing. So it never gets cured. I just want everyone to know out there, you're never going to fill this hole, because even if you get to where everyone's like, oh, this guy did it great. Like gets booked everywhere and blah, blah, blah. Even then I'm like, oh, but Seth Troxler has a residency at DC-10 and I'll never get it. You know, like, there's still like, you can't get into this club or you can't get into this club. You'll never be happy. Yeah.
No, it's insane. I mean, the example, I've used this so many times over the years, but it's like, it's the best illustration to me is, you know, it's like you look at like Jay-Z wants to be U2 and U2 wants to be the Beatles. And like, it just never, there's no level where that ends.
It's crazy.
You know?
Maybe that's why we're just so driven to keep going forward. Because if you didn't have some kind of drive like that, what would be the point anyway? But it is fun. I have fun. I make music and I appreciate everything. And I appreciate everybody who comes to see me. And I do like the community feeling. Like when I go to a show and I play, I would so much rather play a small room where I felt like everyone was really psyched and like into it than a big room of just people who just bought tickets because that was what was going on that weekend.
Yes.
And this is going on my Instagram right now. We just had this meeting about this, of how weird this is. The Claude Instagram has like so many followers, right?
Yeah.
And the Barclay one is like an eighth. But the Claude Instagram will get like 20 comments. And the Barclay Instagram right now, everything that you put up is getting like 4,000.
Dude.
And the reason is because no one's an idiot and everyone knows what you're into and everyone knows what's authentic and everyone realizes what is going on and like what you are doing that you feel.
Of course.
So you just can't fake it.
You can't fake it. Yeah, you can't fake it. And I think there's a tie-in here to sort of the algorithmic discovery era that we're in right now too, because it's the same thing with, say, Spotify numbers, right? Like somebody could have millions and millions of streams on Spotify, but can't sell 100 tickets to fill up a room or something, right?
That's fascinating.
And, you know, even from just a business, like I think it's a good lesson for artists to take out of it, both of these examples, is that, you know, people get so focused on you just want the biggest number, but what you actually want is a smaller number of core people who will, you know, if you can get 100 people to buy a t-shirt a few times a year, for a small artist, that can be it. You almost don't need more, you know?
Yeah, I don't know who the person is that started this philosophy, but there is somebody that wrote this whole thing about having a 1,000 super dedicated followers is better than having like 1 million followers.
Right.
Because those people will just follow you into battle.
Yeah.
And they're 100%. Just invaluable.
And I mean, that's,
so I
it's
that.
human, right? Like that's a more natural size. I think I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but I feel like that's sort of everything now is so global. We're so interconnected. You see everything around the world in real time, but you know, human history, it's never been like that. It's always been smaller groups of people banding together, knowing everybody, helping each other out. I don't have like a crystallized point here, but I do feel like there's lessons to be learned from that, you know?
Well, I can even break it down for you in data. So we have this massive mailing list of like everybody that ever did anything at Dirtybird, right? And I was like, I'm going to start a weekly newsletter this time. I learned from my mistakes in the past. So now I'm doing a weekly newsletter where I'm just talking to only the people that actually give a shit.
Yeah.
And not the 175,000 other people. I'm sending them like 6 messages being like, if you do care, I'm over here.
Yeah.
And then after that, I don't care. But we found like this works, like just cutting it down to the people who actually do want to hear from you is so liberating. It's like I'm actually writing to people who want to read it instead of just writing these bullshit posts and hoping that all these people are going to click on it who could just give one shit about anything I'm doing. And now I'm actually writing things to people who want to read them. It's crazy. It makes me feel so much better about it. And like, I think the people feel better about it because I'm writing directly to them. And it's just a totally different vibe.
Of course. And you can make more of a connection with those people when you're being that authentic self. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with tech house getting so big that, or anything, once it gets to a certain level, you have to strip away some of the personality, some of the identity to make it so everybody can understand and consume it. And it's the same for communicating. It's the same for reaching people who like what you do. It's all kind of the same idea. I never thought about that, but it's really all the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that there is a place for this massive artist.
Of course,
who's just a little bit more down the middle. It's just kind of something like, what are you comfortable with as a human being? Like, do you want to be niche? I really like being niche, and I'm comfortable with being niche, and I've done great being niche. And some people would want to be broad and like get it to as many people as they can get it to. And that's awesome. Like, good for them. But it's just, I like living in the niche.
I think we need both. And I think what's important in both of the sides you just described is like, they're both intentional choices. They're people who understand what they want and why they want it. And regardless of underground or mainstream, that's what's going to get me to invest in somebody making art, is when I can tell that they have a clear perspective on what they're doing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have a further point from that. But but let me add, I mean, in that spirit, talking about the Barclay Crenshaw project, what I had not fully realized, I knew that you had released stuff as Barclay Crenshaw from time to time, but I hadn't realized how far it went back. Like, I was on the Spotify page for Barclay Crenshaw, and I mean, there's releases from, I think, 2012 or 2013, old records with Eprom, and how long has that?
I think maybe 2015 might be the start of it. I'm not entirely sure, but I will credit Eprom because, so I had all these, like, I was into breaks, and then I was into jungle, and then I was super into hip hop younger, like really into it. And then I just got on this house thing, and I just kind of didn't acknowledge my other passion for a really long time until I heard Eprom's album. I think it was called Afterlife or something.
Okay.
I'll have to look it up. It's the second album. It's not the first album. The first album had a single on it that blew my mind, but the second album is like, it's got to be in my like top 5 favorite albums by anyone. Is so crazy and interesting, and still better than most things coming out now. Yeah. And I just couldn't believe it was like the first time I heard Ed Rush and Optical Wormhole.
Oh yeah.
CDs, where I was like, well, what is this? What is going on over there? So the first person that I wanted to work with was him. And I will say the coolest part about flipping into bass is that everybody's very friendly, and they all kind of, I don't know if a bass DJ coming into house would be as accepted with open arms as I have been flipping from house into bass. Let's just say that. I think the community is really receptive and warm. And yeah, there's like that little hater element of like, I have this jungle dub plate and you don't. But that's a very small portion. And house is a little snootier. And I have no idea what I'm talking about. I just got off on some crazy tangent.
No, I think that's just what we're going to be doing here. I think this is good. But I guess for me, like thinking about the early Barclay Crenshaw tunes up till now, I was going back, I was listening to that album, like that, the one track you did, You Were in My System with the Cool Kids. I had completely forgotten about it. I love that track. And I guess my question just in general is like, if you look at those older tracks versus your return to the project now, does it feel different? Is the aim still the same thing? Has anything changed about the way you see that project?
I would say that project is extremely influenced by 90s hip hop and like lo-fi. And I went into a studio and had real musicians play all the samples, and it was very organic. And this album in particular is more of a screenshot into like a vibe. I don't know how to explain it. This one is more UK centric, but it's also way more eclectic. Like there's a song on this album that sounds like a Thievery Corporation meets Fela Kuti. And then there's a song that sounds like Sublime. And there's like singing. And there's like a semi-pop UK song. And then there's like a hard bass song. And then there's a deep house dubstep. So it's like, this one is way more all over the place, but it definitely has a little bit more of a UK tinge to it as well. Then the first album was very American, very, I love DJ Premier.
Right.
But
well, yeah. I mean, would it be accurate to say the first album was kind of paying homage to your roots a bit more, and this is kind of where you're at with it now?
This is a jumping off point. This one is more of a jumping off point to kind of say, I am a music producer and I am not just a bass DJ.
Right.
So I'm going to do a lot of stuff. Well, it's not going to just be a 45-minute dubstep set.
Yeah, which thank you for that. But am I also right? I was reading that all of the songs for this album were written in a somewhat compressed period of time.
Yeah, that was the other thing that there was like a big breakthrough for me. The first album took me a year, and most of my Claude VonStroke albums took me a very long time. And I decided that I would try this. I've been working with this time management guy for so long. His name is Mike Monday. I'm sure some people have heard of him. If you haven't, I take one of his classes. He's amazing. Mm. But anyway, I work with him one-on-one. I'm very lucky that I have the ability to do that. And I have been working with him forever. And I was like, I'm going to make this record in 80 days. And I thought that was some crazy, unachievable thing. He's like, well, I made my last album in like 14 days. Yeah. And he's just like a maniac at time management. And I'm just a time management person in training. Right.
You're the apprentice.
But the amazing thing I will tell you is that because I had this like mindset of abundance and just constant loop making, relentless. I came out of this project in 80 days. I made the record and I said, whatever's on the record at the end of the 80 days is what's on the record. And that is a really good way to work as well. Cause then you're just like that guy in Vermont who hasn't sent me his second singing part is not on the album, and that's just life.
Right.
I came out of it with like 200 beats and like just materials that have still been paying dividends past the album. I mean, I'm saying like this, the album's not even out, but I'm like already onto the next tracks. And also gave me a window of like, you did these songs for this album, so what was missing? And I'm like, oh, I should go. My next thing is I should go to Atlanta with like 150 beats and see if I can make a trap record.
Oh,
then I should go to whatever, Detroit, and make an electro record. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's like, I see what I still want to get to. And it's just cool that I'm not limiting because in house music, it's like you're making house music, you're making tech house or techno or deep house, but you're just making the same shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this, I'm like, I can make a singing song, I can make a funk song. I don't know. I feel way better about it.
Yeah, and I bet there's something freeing to that idea too, that yes, you can make all of these different things, but also you can still present them as a unified artist project. You can take that project on tour. Like, that doesn't have to mean that all the other structure that we think about of a DJ producer project has to fall away, right?
Right. Absolutely. I think that even though this album is all over the place, you can still tell they're all by me, which is a good marker, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard to do too. Is the loop making thing, you said you were just constantly making tons and tons of loops, is that part of the time management stuff you've been working on? Like, I'm kind of curious, without, giving away all of his secrets, like, what have you really taken?
Away. He would love it. He would love it if I was.
No, please, yeah. Like, what's really helpful to you that you've learned from him?
I started really implementing it on my last Claude VonStroke album, which I probably made in 6 months, which was way faster than I had made previous ones. But it's kind of this. The best way to explain it is it's like this NCAA March Madness tournament thing where you make as many ideas as you can within let's say 3 weeks. Let's just say some arbitrary number. You just do 5 ideas a day, as many ideas as you can a day. And it just doesn't matter what the quality is. It's absolutely no relevance what the quality is. You're just ideating. Then you take that list and you have to have a program like Trello or Sana or one of these things that you can see it in a board.
Sure.
And that's when I'm saying it's the NCAA tournament. Then you're like, okay, these 50 move on to the next level.
Yeah. They get into the semis. Yeah.
And then the 50, you're like, well, let's work on the 50 and see which ones you're really getting into. And then all of a sudden that 50 gets to 20 really fast. And then you're like, okay, well, what do I want to finish? And that just gets, then you somehow get down to 10 or 15 tracks, and that's it, from like so many ideas. And that doesn't mean that there's not 10 ridiculously good ideas still in that initial column. It just means that that's what this thing became. Right. So you can still go back and fish your stuff out later.
And I think there's something, I mean, that makes total sense. And I think there's something in that too. It just made me think about, I was talking to somebody who had been working with Skrillex recently, and he was saying this thing Skrillex kept doing was he would flip open his laptop, make a beat for no more than 60 seconds. It'd be like 30 to 60 seconds, and then just close the laptop and not come back to it for a while. And there's, I think, something similar in what you're talking about of like quickly making a bunch of ideas where you can kind of crystallize whatever the purest idea is. And then later you come back with a much more analytical bent on it. But there's something cool about that where it's like you don't have to balance sort of the creative and the analytical. It's like, no, just like vomit out everything and figure it all out later.
It's definitely a good way to work. In my first records, I would we call it beat songs into submission.
Yeah. Of course. I'm the same way. It doesn't matter if
3 months in and you're just, I finally beat this track. I finally won.
Yeah. I think I would, and this is just me, I'm not putting this on you, but I think for me too, I would get so precious about my ideas probably because of a fear response where I was like, oh, I finally found this cool idea. It's probably some insecurity where I'm like, I have to make this perfect because maybe I won't have another good idea for a while. You know what I mean?
And that's kind of the thing about, yes, I totally relate to that 100%. I used to feel like that, but that is part of the thing where you think that you can't think of new ideas, but
Yeah,
really all you have to, it's like, if I don't sit down and make, this is a Pharrell concept also. He says the same thing. He's like, if you don't sit down and make 3 or 4 beats today, it's almost like you didn't use your God library card.
Right.
It's like you have the library card and you have the abilities, and definitely something cool will happen if you sit down and do this every day. And if you don't sit down and do it every day, nothing cool will happen, guaranteed.
Yeah. Dude, it's so funny. You're the second person in like a week who's mentioned that Pharrell quote to me, and it makes so much sense that like, actually, yeah, the our ideas, we don't own them. We're just checking them out from the universe. It's such a freeing idea because it takes all the pressure off, you know?
Right. No, I did things on this record that I didn't think I would do. Like I sang a lot.
Have you done that
and
before?
Then I have is very drift on my house records, but I didn't like really lean into it. And then I also tried to rap, and I didn't end up using it, but I'm just proud of myself that I even made the attempt.
Well, hey,
it wasn't good.
I happen to know that you at one point had an entire rap album and performed concerts and sold mixtapes. So there's some precedent. What do you envision the open channel tour for this looking like? Is this going to feel or look significantly different from things people may know you from or associate you with before?
I've learned quite a bit about DJing since the last time I went out, and just the way to move, the art form of moving a room from vibe to vibe, I've gotten exponentially better at. And I would even say like the first time out, I was still kind of a drinking sloppy mess. And now I don't drink or anything. And I've really gotten a lot better at performing and getting between tracks and like transitions, and just, I think it will be a better show. You'll hear stuff that you will not be able to find, I promise you, anywhere.
Yeah.
Because I'm digging so deep to find stuff, and if I'm finding stuff that I think you might even know, I'm editing it and making it different. In that regard, I just think there's something going on with the way that people are hearing things. So let's say you have a playlist that you like, right? The Spotify is identifying that playlist, and then it's just feeding you something extremely similar to that. And then you're listening to that, and then you're just getting something similar to that. And your playlists are going like this to the point where you're just in this thing, and you're like, how come I never get any new tunes anymore? And I think that's happening to a lot of people. And so I'm making a concerted effort to just be like, I'm breaking out, and I'm like going over here, and I'm going over here, and I'm going over here, and I'm going to bring it in, and it's going to be surprising.
And you're right that, that not only just being surprised, but people wanting to be surprised is something that I think in the age of the algorithm, people sort of forget they want that, or that feels good. Like I was reading that part of this too, or maybe the Barclay Crenshaw project originally was inspired by low end theory. And when I think about, I'd love to hear your reflections and memories on low end theory. For me, part of what I think about when I think about them is you would go there, and sort of the whole point was you knew you would hear something new, something you hadn't heard before. Like the surprise was a big part of that for me.
I mean, I'm sure there's someone else doing that kind of a party now, but that was definitely a special moment in time where, like, the discovery of hearing, it's like what you're saying. If you went to that, you would just be like, what is this? What is this? What is this? I don't know. That was a really cool party. A very interesting scene. Kind of blew up in the end, but it was awesome.
Did you feel any connection to it? Because I think of that as being another really strong sense of community. Like, I think there are parallels to what you did with Dirtybird in like that low end theory beat scene.
Yeah. I think it's a similar community, and even like the do-over. There's all these little pockets of LA that are really interesting. I don't know. All of that stuff is cool to me. It's like, I like that. That I definitely am headed back in that direction again. Hopefully, I will be so lucky to even dream of making something even remotely close to as cool as Low End Theory. But I'm all about creating community, and I'm going to try my best to do it again.
Hey, man. I mean, who better than you? That's what I say, man. Because not many.
This is part of my hook is to see if I can do it again.
Right. Part of the motivation. Like, yeah.
I'm like, was that just an accident? Was it just a total accident, or did you actually tap into something?
I mean, probably a little of both, right? Because I think so much of it is timing. And I remember the first time we did this when we were here with Lubelski, you were talking about, that you had a thing I wrote down because I thought it was funny that, at age 30, you were duplicating DVDs and being like, I don't know if this is going to work. So it's not like you didn't spend a fair amount of time having it not work out first,
Oh yeah, I was a late bloomer, and I was almost like I have like this positivity gene, because I was almost delusional until about 30, and then at 30, I was like, oh my God, it's definitely possible that it's not going to work out for me. And all the way up until then, I was like, oh, it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
No problem. I think my parents told me I was cool or something.
Yeah. I mean, that helps. But but I think everybody does have that moment of like, okay, maybe I need to adjust my perceptions here.
I think maybe even that panic, that psychological feeling of, oh, guess what? Everybody doesn't make it, is partially maybe why I turned it around as well.
Yeah, there's something to that too. I mean, it's funny. It makes me think about that creative versus analytical discussion we were talking about in terms of production earlier. It's sort of the same for carving your path in life, right? Like, you have to sort of live in both worlds of, one, you kind of need some of the delusional confidence to get anywhere. But then at the same time, if you go too far down that road without protecting yourself at all, people kind of get detached from reality, and that can be bad too.
But it is a good lesson because I do see a lot of kids who are like 24, and because something didn't break their way, it's like the end of the world. And it's just, I think it's good to just have a lot of things not go your way before they do.
Dude, it's essential. It's essential. The only way I've learned almost literally anything in life is by failing at it first. Yeah.
It's really important. I think a lot of the biggest disasters in entertainment are people who just really lucked out.
That's a tough one.
Went straight to the moon on like try number one. I would bet that like 90% of those stories are disaster stories.
That's a tough one, man. Yeah, because you're not ready for it. I mean, look at what happens to child stars. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Some of them, the rare person figures it out, like a Jason Bateman or something, and just says, you know what? I see all the mess that's going on here.
Of course. Yeah, there's no one size fits all, but I do think in general, keeping this kind of stuff in mind is only going to help a young artist. We're going to keep it to 60 minutes here. So let me ask you this to kind of wrap it up. As long as we're talking about the full circle journey, you coming back to this project, renewing it with new energy, new ideas, all of that. Who was actual Barclay the kid? Like before you were really, trying to make it in music, where does this come from? The interest in it? Was there something early on? Was it the electrifying mojo on the radio? Like, what flipped the switch for you as a kid, and who was that kid?
Yeah, I was very much into 80s rap, and I don't know what the actual point was, but there was definitely a point where I was like, how do they do it? How do they actually make it? How do they cook the sausage? And then I started really trying to figure it out with no information. And I really went down some wrong paths. Like the only information that you could get would be like magazines from England, like right. Sound on Sound. It would be like way too technical for a kid anyway. I don't know. But I was obsessed with it. I had a really crappy Kawai drum machine just because I didn't know any better. I would record Jambox to Jambox at first to like overdub. And then I got a 4-track recorder, which records 4 different tracks on one cassette. And I just kept like building my arsenal. I finally got I mowed enough lawns to get a sampler. And then I got a sequencer for the sampler. And then I had a MIDI controller for the sampler. But it was like all these like incremental struggles.
Of course. I mean, doing it with all gear adds another level of complication right off the bat. I guess my question is like, was anybody else around you doing this?
Absolutely not. And that is really why that is why I'm so into like mentoring and education and like, because it was so impossible to figure anything out. Like I didn't know anyone who did music. My parents only listened to classical music. No one understood rap music in my neighborhood. They were like, what the fuck is this? I was like, and I had there was no like internet message board. There's no person.
Yeah. Except
for this one kid named Jamie Osborne. He kind of got it. So I would talk to him about it. But even him, he was always into like other stuff. So it was tough. Honestly, I don't know how I got anywhere. I didn't learn it all.
Well, and okay, 2 things. That connects something for me of why you're community focused at this point, because it's like building the thing you always wanted. And it makes sense why you'd be good at it because you sort of know how it should be or what you wished you would have had. That makes total sense to me. And then I think there's a second component of like, if no one else was around you doing it, if you didn't have a big support system or knowledge base, there must have been something like, why did you keep going? Because I think a lot of kids would have a weird interest that no one supported and kind of just drop it,
Because I loved it. I loved everything about it instantly. Just being able to make something was just so cool to me. I like make a thing that you could listen to after. I don't know. It was just, as soon as I started doing it, I was obsessed with it for like the rest of my life. Yeah. And I got sidetracked. I thought I was going to be a movie director because they're very like, oh, I can make a movie because I can make a song, like it's the same kind of vibe. But what I didn't realize on that path is a movie director is like an orchestra conductor for like 500 people. A music producer can just make a song.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's it. I'm much better at making a song than controlling 500 people.
And I think that's also a perfect full circle thing because it's like that realization of like, I want this community, but just in case I can't always find this community, I'm going to make sure that I can do this myself, you know?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I love that, man. Well, dude, it's always great to talk to you. Is there anything else we should say about Barclay Crenshaw? Anything about the album coming up, the tour in 2024? Anything else on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, the album is going to start rolling out in January. The first single is two guys from UK, Snowy and Manga, two grime MCs. Really cool guys. Really, we had a lot of fun making the track in the studio over in London. And then there's another person after that. Her name is T Zondos. That's the second single. And that'll be somebody that nobody's heard of over here, but she's awesome as well. And then the album is going to come out like early March, right when the tour starts. And right now the tour is only 10 cities, but I'm playing a bunch of festivals, including some Michigan stuff, Electric Forest and Movement. I don't know if I'm allowed to say any of that, but whatever.
Yeah. We can take it out later if we have to, yeah.
But I think it's cool. I'm excited, and I'm like really. I have a track out right now with Of the Trees.
I like that one a lot, man.
Fun.
That's another UK influenced one for sure.
Yeah, so that's another dividend from my 80-day. I had Tyler was emailing me back and forth, and there was a train strike, and so Strategy couldn't get down to the studio while I was in town. And I'm like, Tyler, do you like Strategy? And he's like, yeah, hell yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, this beat that we're working on, we'll just do it with Strategy right after I finish this album. And that's that track.
That's great. I love it, man. It felt fresh to me too, from something unexpected from both of you guys. You know what I mean?
Cool. That's good. Good review. I'll take it.
No, it's good. I really liked it, man. And I really like talking to you, dude. This was awesome. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much for having me again.
All right,
I'll
man.
see you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks, dude. Peace.